I'm Daniel Robb. I work for Google. I'm the head of travel. I joined Google 9 years ago when we were a small business of 46 people. I was the first travel employee, or the first employee to be focused solely on travel outside of the United States, and I'm still there. Going back, I did architecture as a degree, and as like all poor architects, meaning not very good architects, I left almost immediately after university. I did an honours in town planning. I went to work for the brewing industry, where I worked in marketing alcopops, which was fun for a couple of years. I then moved to London and joined a sales house not 150 yards away from where we're sitting right now as a very junior sales executive. Track forward, after about 4 years in business-to-business publishing, I joined Teletext, which, as everyone will probably realise, was very much a forerunner of kind of the internet in terms of travel distribution and travel media. I worked there for 8 years and became commercial manager. So I was working on the launch of our online proposition. We were very much an analog TV business at the time. And again, 8.5 years ago, I joined Google. At Google, we are responsible, my division particularly is responsible for the larger of the clients within the travel sphere. And like all good businesses, what we try to do is really adhere and create solutions for all of our travel businesses within the digital landscape. Now that has evolved greatly since I joined Google. It started off, it was very, very simple around the AdWords product. Over time we have purchased companies, we've developed new products, and now I think we've got a suite of products which cover most of the digital landscape. So that adds a huge level of complexity in terms of what we do. Coming back to the role itself, so I have a team of 28. We really deal with these clients. I have a dotted line into all travel clients, and our idea is to try and make sure that we keep travel at the very bleeding edge of all of those digital developments. Travel's been an early adopter of most things digital, particularly around the performance area, and I think our task is certainly to keep ahead of that. Now, what does solutions really mean? I think what we're trying to do is become more of a business consultant. We try to understand the genuine problems that our clients are facing, and that's not necessarily purely around distribution or sales or the purchase of our products, but it's about the integration of several products together to really knit together a strategy for clients. We're encouraging the building of a digital spine, if you like, within our clients' businesses, and I think we've had very, very good success, albeit I wouldn't say across our entire portfolio, but certainly we've got some great success to point to. And I think the UK market particularly is very interesting because it's highly penetrated in terms of the digital landscape, very mature, and I think it's incumbent on myself then for Google as a whole, as a global organisation, to continue the pace setting for travel businesses and how they adopt digital products. And I think we've done a very good job of that so far. I think it's a constant challenge. I think that we say often at Google that our task is to remain uncomfortably excited. It's often more uncomfortable than the excitement, but certainly I think, what does that mean? That certainly means for us that we're very ready and very embracing of change, and I think it's incumbent again to bring that to our clients. So customers telling us about 2013 in particular, I think that we have seen a very difficult start to the year. I think it's interesting that 2013 is the first year for quite a few years we haven't got a major sporting event or something that's going to be disruptive in that. So we may see a flattening of patterns around more natural booking behaviour. I think the year started well. I think it's got less good throughout Q1. I think that there's a natural resurgence of some markets within, and meaning product markets within Europe. So we saw a big drift towards Eastern Med destinations, for example, in the last 3 years. And with Egypt being the exception, because Egypt is growing from a point of civil unrest, etc. So it's certainly growing back to its natural place within the destination mix, you would say. But I think we're seeing a return to some of the Western Med destinations. I think we all know that the British consumer will go where there's value. And I think the fiscal situation that we have in Greece, in Spain, Italy, etc., I think is actually encouraging people to go there, which is hugely beneficial for those economies. And I think those economies, while they're in a state of turmoil, one would say, one of the things that travel can do is drive traffic and therefore revenue into these destinations. So I think we're seeing a slight destination change. The most key thing I think that we can comment on at Google with some authority is the change of device usage. So tracking back 4 years, you would have seen predominantly all activity digitally looking for travel happening over a desktop computer. We've seen a huge migration to tablet, and in fact we now separate out our tablet behavior from our desktop and our high-end mobile device. Tablet and desktop taken together are net growing at roughly the same rate that search has always grown at. I think it's important to say that perhaps we look at search as being a barometer of UK consumer behaviour. It's so penetrated. So I think we can, with some authority, say that that's a definite dynamic. We've seen absolutely exponential growth in the usage of high-end devices, both in app and both in search, which is very good, but again, there's a challenge because I think the return on investment metric that is there with tablet and desktop is yet to occur to such a great degree. In terms of other factors that we've seen, I think that within the hotel sphere, for example, I think they had, tracking slightly forward, I suppose, into Q2 of 2013, they benefited, I think, from the Olympics, obviously, and I think that drove an awful lot of activity. I think that's probably softened a bit. In fact, I'm very sure it's softened. I think the RevPARs that you would see in hotels would illustrate that. I think equally the domestic market, the domestic holiday market, I think had a pretty good year and has had probably a pretty good year for the last 3 years. And we're seeing some softening in that, but not to the degree of alarm. I think it's just a natural settling. So I think, as I said, the absence of some major sporting events has allowed us to actually look at 2013 with some predictive confidence, and I think we'll see a return to some behaviours. I think looking at the short haul and long haul dynamic, I don't think we've seen that much growth in long haul apart from some notable destinations. Las Vegas, for example, New York is growing again. I think the short haul dynamic is probably where most of the growth is coming. And I think that there's some challenges with that. I think that obviously within the supply chain we're seeing some more restriction. I think you only have to look at the Ryanair principle about how they're letting people book flights now, very much looking towards the individuals, and I think that's going to cause a challenge for everybody, and that will be reflected in terms of the dynamics of how people's product is then represented in marketing. Major trends that we're seeing, obviously within the devices, we're seeing the migration to tablet and high-end device, with high-end device being notably ahead of tablet, and all of that coming to the detriment of desktop behaviour. So if you imagine that desktop behaviour, computer desktop behaviour is largely flat year on year, all of the growth coming in tablets and high-end devices. I think it's a challenge for high-end device and luxury product, for example. I think that's one notable deviation. And I think what we see is the behaviour on tablet, which has historically been very affluent, very high-end, and that it was assumed that these are the people that can afford tablets. That started to normalise with general desktop behaviour as the British populace becomes more penetrated in terms of tablets. I think coming back to the short haul and long haul dynamic, as I said, I think we're seeing probably a flat rate of growth in terms of long haul, and I think we're seeing incremental growth coming in short haul. We're seeing a return to some of the Western Med destinations. The price-conscious Brit is definitely going to be encouraged by low pricing in there. It all depends on currency, etc. I think there's been some capacity changes, certainly, which is promoting certain destinations over another, but I think the return to the Western Med destinations is both healthy for their economies as well as the British consumer. One of the trends I think that we've seen is there is a focus on differentiated product from some of the big tour operators, for example. I think the British consumer is becoming more attuned to the assets that products offer them. I think the exposure of a lot of data, a lot of rich media, a lot of rich content is certainly helping the purchase chain. And I think people have invested very heavily in that over the past few years. Again, we've seen the growth of video. It continues unabated. Just to reiterate that, YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world now, and we're very confident now that it has its place within this whole digital marketing landscape. So I think that's the major trend. I think the supply chain is a challenge for everybody. I think to come back to the Ryanair example, I think the restriction of flight availability, particularly in dynamic packaging, could be an issue. I don't think it's a particular issue at the moment, but it could become an issue. I think the overheads are a continued challenge. I think that marketing costs continue to rise. I think the costs of distribution are starting to settle as people rationalise various distribution channels and are probably becoming slightly more or certainly within the scope of parity than they have been in the past. I think probably the biggest challenge for my clients is to remain at the head of the game. I think it's very difficult for people to pace ahead of development, technology development. People like ourselves are very much, the root cause of all of that, I would say, but in a good way, certainly, and I think it's a challenge. I think the challenges for businesses are how do they replicate the need to keep ahead of consumer trending and future-proof their businesses, and while at the same time deliver their numbers. And I think that most interestingly, with the early adoption businesses, that they now look at statistically valid tests on very small scales to educate all of their decision making. So for example, if you look at some of the big research houses, they'll do surveys of 1,000 to 2,000 people, which is deemed as statistically valid certainly, and something that they can then build a strategy upon. I think within the digital landscape, it's becoming easier and easier and easier to do these tests. And I think that the really clever businesses are now looking at the adaptive nature of their business and looking at how they can educate that with very small bits of data, tying that together to educate their future strategies. Advice for people starting in the industry, I think I wouldn't say that this is completely consistent with someone starting in the industry, but I think as soon as you can, ally yourself to a product that you're very proud of or very passionate about, certainly. And I think if you're working in an area where the product doesn't exist, the end product that gets sold to the consumer or gets sold up the supply chain, I think unless you're extremely proud of that and extremely passionate about it, it becomes difficult. I mean, travel is all about, and it's an overused adage at times, but it is certainly about the one big dreamlike purchase that people make every year. And I think unless you think that you've got a product that's actually adhering to all of these consumers' aspirations, I think it becomes more difficult. I think that businesses evolve, so don't be worried too much about the evolution of your own business, but be worried more about the evolution of your product. One major issue, I think legislation is the biggest issue at the moment. I think that the tax situation is still a big issue, APD. I think that there has to be some sort of parity around protection for consumers, and I think the consumers need to understand where they're protected, where they're willing to do away with that protection in favour of other means, whether it be through their credit card purchases, etc. But I think that's still one of the biggest challenges. If I could give you a second challenge, I think that multi-channel businesses need to do a better job about understanding exactly how their assets in each channel can support the business as a whole. And the obvious example of that is how can retail and digital work better together in a big multi-channel business. I think there's still the opportunity to bring them much closer together. I think travel as a whole, is becoming less innovative. And I think that innovation in travel needs to be the task of everyone. We've seen some great business models that have been developed in the last 2 years, notably Hotel Tonight is a mobile-only travel agent, Airbnb is a completely new product within travel. And I think we need to embrace that change. I think we need to integrate these people into the general travel community so that we can learn from them, because I think that notably we will move at a slower pace than, for example, the retail sector if that continues. My favourite destination is the Maldives, but I wouldn't go back with small children as I have at the moment. So what do I like to do on holiday? I really, really like to spend my whole holiday with my children. And I have 4-year-old twins, and they're becoming more and more fun to go on holiday with. I tend not to drink very much, tend to use it as recuperation rather than anything else. And I think as the kids get older, I'm looking forward to exploring new destinations. At the moment, we seem pretty much mortgaged into going to Mallorca 3 times a year, which is no bad thing.